So let's get started. I think the first item on the agenda, we have Mo Goulet here with a couple of construction project requests. So take it away, Mo.
Good evening. These two paving projects were discussed previously on Selectmen's meetings. Basically, these are the project requests from the state that we need approval from the Board of Selectmen. For North Street and for Main Street, we're looking to do a surface treatment of a bonded wearing course on Main Street and a mill and overlay on the section of North Street that's been kind of deteriorating over the years. So we want to make sure that we address these issues.
Okay. Any questions, Eileen?
Just one quickie, because I've sat in a couple of these meetings the last few weeks, and there was talk of a potential sidewalk going down 109. We won't be putting something down to tear up later. That's further down the road?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, that's with the state, what they call the Transportation Improvement Program, that we would apply to the state to give us federal and state funding for that project. That would include mobility for sidewalks, for pedestrians, bike lanes, whatever we can do to get traffic and mobility through town.
And the same is true with North Street down the road. If we could go to take our utilities and put them underground, that's a project further down the road.
Correct.
This is now just to make it smooth, so we're not.
Right. So, I mean, right now, if you look at the news, many communities are dealing with a lot of claims from insurance companies, a lot of vehicles. I think they were saying it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 billion that people are spending on their vehicles because of the conditions of the roadways. So we're trying to do our part and trying to make things better for the immediate future, and then looking down the road to get these projects funded fully.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Pete?
For those of us that don't pave every day, can you just explain mill and overlay?
Yep. Milling is what they call cold planing. You grind the road down. It could be 2 inches, could be 1.5 inches, depending on what you have for a top layer. You want to try to get that top layer that's deteriorating and falling apart off the existing base layer. So once that's ground down, then we pave. We use a super pave mix, which is higher quality, and we have it tested during the operation, so we kind of ensuring our quality. It's quality assurance, quality control. And the paving is done. They use vibratory rollers to roll the pavement, so it's compacted very well. So we get longevity out of these roads. So we're hoping to get that surface. It'll be a nice riding surface for the vehicles, and hopefully that'll last a good long time until we can get funded for the rest of the project.
So am I remembering correctly that this is one of those situations where we just hire a contractor to do the paving for us?
Correct. So we belong
We
to
don't
the
do this in-house.
Southeastern Regional Services Group. We go out to bid with 26 other communities. We get the lowest prices that we can, and they base it on volume. So we've saved a lot of money going through these consortiums. And the contractor that we've had for the last 3 years, we were able to roll them over. This is our last year of that contract with them. So we still get the same price, but there is an escalation clause because of liquid asphalt costs and diesel fuel costs. When they go up, they get somewhat of an escalation cost that goes with it. But when the costs go down, we get a de-escalation cost. So.
Well, I just want to express my appreciation for the $113,000 cost for North Street, because I know that I've heard, I thought there was a culvert in there at one point that was going to cost us over $1 million or something, so that I'm very appreciative of that price, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, thank you.
I had 3 questions. One of them might be Christine. It seemed like the forms were different than I've seen before, which is fine. I was just wondering, who has this, does one or more of us need to sign this?
I think one is sufficient, but if you wanted all 3 of you sign as well too. But they just need one of the selectmen to sign.
So one, so it's a single,
Yeah.
okay.
These forms here, it's called Map It, so the state has gotten a lot fancier, so we have to kind of jump through hoops to get this done.
I kind of like the form. I mean, in that it's a clean form and the font size isn't so small that I have to put glasses on to read it. Those are all good things. I had 2 other questions, and this is partly I guess it's the Map It part. This is on the Pine to Jane's project.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the picture, and I see the magenta
Correct.
Pine to Jane's, and then there's this.
Those are other projects that are on the list
Okay.
in the town. So you're gonna see that in multiple, with the
Got
more
it.
work
So
we
it's
do,
got
you'll see
nothing to do
those.
with it, okay? And then the last question, you'll hate me for this one. There's an environmental screening checklist.
Correct.
Again, it's the Pine to Jane's. The next to the last question says, is any work proposed in or within 100 feet of a wetland, stream, pond, swamp, et cetera?
And I had put no down.
Yes, you did, and I was thinking Meeting House Pond.
So, I knew you were gonna ask that.
Man comes prepared.
So, CMR 310 of the Department of Environmental Protection.
Yep.
With minor activities, and they define what minor activities, and I have it highlighted, because I know you like to
I'm
highlight. So it does exempt us from
Okay,
filing with the Conservation Commission if you're replacing what's existing and you're not widening
Got it.
or doing anything
Okay.
different.
very good.
Oh, boy, I knew that
Touche.
was coming. That was
Touche,
gold. That was
Mo.
gold right there.
I got set up for that.
That was a lot.
Now I'm wondering whether there were any other questions you thought I was gonna ask that I hadn't thought of.
I got more paper.
No. Okay, I guess those are my only questions, so we're ready for a motion.
I move to vote to approve Chapter 90 project request in the amount of $354,000 for Main Street Route 109 from Brook Street to the Dover Town line.
Just the first one?
You want to do them both at once?
Yeah, let's do them both.
Vote also to approve the Chapter 90 project request in the amount of $113,000 for North Street from Janes Avenue to Pine Street.
Second?
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you
Thanks,
very-
Mo.
Thank you very much. Sure.
All right, I think the next item we have on the agenda is to discuss the annual town meeting warrant articles.
Yes, so let me just go through. Usually you take a position on all of the articles before we get to town meeting. So we still have time to do that, but there was still an article that had not been discussed by the board that's being proposed by the board. And we are hoping to go by the end of this week to print on the warrant. So if we're gonna keep the article moving forward, it would need to be included in that printing, and that is the leash bylaw amendment, number 20. So I think if we could focus on that and moving forward on that tonight, we'll be in good shape for the next meeting.
Okay.
Which number is that, Chris?
The number 20.
Thank you.
So, and I'm not sure whether we should have a conversation with the animal control officer and John Thompson on this as well, but at least having an initial sense of what the three of us think about this issue is well worth the discussion. Because I think when we have the discussion with the animal control officer and John, it's going to be around, it should be around the details rather than around the strategic picture. So,
I reached out to her today, but we were
Okay.
supposed to connect and we didn't end up meeting.
Okay.
The call didn't come through, so.
So maybe I'm the one who put it on the list, so why don't I just start with some introductory comments and then open it up to the two of you for comment. I think our predisposition up at the state hospital since we first bought it was to try to maximize the flexibility that people here, especially here in town, we not so much worry, we let people from out of town use it, but I think our interest has been to maximize the use and flexibility of use that people in town have had. One of the main uses that's been very popular has been using the state hospital property for people who want to walk their dogs. It's a big, wide open space, especially people who'd like to have their dogs off leash. It's one of the nicer places here in Medfield. It's not the only one, but it's one of the nicer places to go to do that. We have groups like the VizWiz folks that, from my perspective at least, for a number of years, I haven't seen them up there in a while. I don't know if they're still there as often as they were, but it's a Vizsla dog breed group. They have both, every time I've been up there when they've been there, have been an extremely responsible group in how they've conducted their events. They, on occasion, have come and had volunteer days where they just, because they understand we're giving them a lot of leeway, they've gone up there to clean up the grounds. I think a couple of years ago, we improved the grounds cleanliness a little bit by putting doggy bag dispensers up there and disposal barrels so people didn't automatically have to carry things off. So the intention was to make that easier. Feedback I've gotten more recently, and the feedback I've seen more recently, is that people somehow or another think that putting dog poop in a plastic bag and leaving it on the road is an environmentally sensitive and totally responsible thing to do. So I think the problem with that has increased over time. In the last 2 years, we have gotten a couple of reports from people who have come in. The one that's bothered me the most was an email that we got probably about a year ago from a lady here in town who routinely walks inside the quad with some senior women that just every, some number of mornings each week like to just go and they get their exercise around the quad. One of her companions, who I believe was around 70, was walking a dog that was actually a friendly dog, came running up from behind and jumped up on this woman and basically sent her sprawling on the sidewalk. Apparently there was no major injuries that resulted from that, but for anybody who's got elderly parents or anything like that, you're undoubtedly sensitive to exactly how dangerous a head injury can be to an elder person. So that's what led to the signs going up inside the quad that dogs inside the quad have to be on a leash. Although it wasn't in Medfield, about a year and a half ago, there was I think she was the captain, I think, of the Dover Sherborne cross-country team. If it wasn't the cross-country team, it was the track team. She was out running on the Dover Sherborne part of this property. 2 dogs, I think they were sort of pit bull type dogs, were running loose. At least one of them bit her. And the thing that really riled me up about that one, even though it wasn't on our property, is that the owner of the 2 dogs was at some distance. When this happened, the owners retrieved their dogs, or the 1 or 2 owners that were there retrieved their dogs and exited the property. And this poor girl wound up having to go through a complete rabies series only because the owners wouldn't report who they were, so that the girl could find out whether the dogs had been vaccinated for rabies. She was the captain of her team. She missed her state meet. My guess is it pretty well screwed up her season. So we have these isolated incidents that have occurred that they're not frequent to the best of my knowledge, but they are serious. And when it comes down to a value judgment between being permissive with dogs running loose and occasionally having senior women out trying to get exercise at the state hospital knocked to the ground, potentially facing what could be a life-threatening injury, I think we have to take a hard look there. We heard, what was it, the last meeting, Pete, or the meeting before that, the folks from Longmeadow came up and talked to us about access to the hospital. Bill, I know you have a neighbor that's had dogs. I guess a neighbor has chickens. And so even out in the back meadow, dogs have been allowed to run loose and leave the state hospital property and go on to people's private property on the adjacent land. That's just over the line. So the issue is, what do you do about all that stuff? As I have understood it over the years, one of our problems right now is that while we can put a sign up telling people that dogs have to be leashed, we essentially have no practical enforcement power to take action in response to those rules. And then I had a more recent conversation that talked about the fact that if you have like a $15 fine or something like that for an infraction, as a practical matter, you have no legal recourse. So you can write somebody up, but if they choose just to ignore you, you can't take them to court for $15 and expect the courts to be willing to take the time it would take to enforce it. So the issue is, so what do we do? That respect, and incidentally, there are people who have written who said, I used to walk up there, I don't walk up there anymore. So it's not just a question of depriving dogs from the freedom of a leash. Right now, our default policies are basically leading some people in town to not use the property because other people in town are using the property with loose dogs that aren't necessarily as welcome to the people who aren't using the property as they are to their owners. So the question is, what do we do about it?
Want me to chime in?
Sure.
Okay. So I have a dog, and I go up there quite a bit. And so we struggle with, in society, if 3% of the people ruin it for 97%, is that really the right way to approach it? So I've given this a lot of thought. I know Christine and I have talked. And if you talk to some of the people that have walked up at Medfield State Hospital in the last week and a half or so, I've made it a point when I am up there and I see a crowd of people coming, whether they're in the quad later in the afternoon, not on leash, or they're just walking the grounds, I will go up and say, excuse me, do you mind if I ask you a question? My name's Eileen Murphy. I was just recently elected as selectman for Medfield, and we have a warrant article coming up that maybe discussing about leash laws. I would love your opinion. Because I actually asked the chief yesterday how many dog incidents have been. There really hasn't been that many. So what I want to make sure what we do is two things. Whatever we choose to do, poor Jenny, give her something that she can work off of. Or, like I'll tell you, like this Saturday, I have all intentions of being up for the Belforge event. You and I can guarantee that with a food truck, music, and the ferry houses being out, there's going to be a lot of people up there walking their dogs. I'm making it my own personal goal to be up there as long as I can and continue to ask this question, like, what can we do? We have to police it, I get that, but how do we do it in a manner where we as you know, I've met people from Rentham, Foxborough, Walpole, a few ironically from Medfield, but so many from not from Medfield, and they respect that. We don't want to start turning people away, because truly 97% of the people, like my guy, some of the people, he's so chill, like he's never on a leash. I always have a leash around my neck, and I should have started with a 2-year-old, a 22-year-old, an 82-year-old should always be able to walk at the state hospital, right? That is true to my heart. But I also believe that like the gentleman that took off with the pit bulls, okay, he probably knows the rule. If he gets turned in, if that's the third time, his dog's going down, right? So there are people, I've witnessed a wheelock. Oh my God, I witnessed a dog get his side of his face chewed. And I immediately asked the gentleman, who are you? He just boogied. And the woman, we went to treat the dog and gave up on trying to get the man because it was horrible. So you've got people that no matter what our fines are, no matter what our rules are, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. I just wanna see if we can get people to start self-policing and work with Jenny to say, Jenny, how do we put this on you? And it's funny, I looked up on our charter, and we do have the ability to give fines, and not just the state hospital, I believe in any town property, which is something I wanted to check with Jenny. So it exists, it's just a matter of, does Jenny walk up and see someone like an Eileen Murphy? I don't even, to be honest, because I really don't want to break the rules. I might break the speed limit every so often, but I try to like go around the outside. I don't want to be the person that's going down the middle of the quad without my dog off the leash, and I know what we're trying to do. So I tend to go along the outer perimeter, and I have a collar, I have a leash around my neck. If I approach anyone and they have a dog on a leash, the first question I ask is, would you prefer I have my dog on a leash? And most people are like, no, I'm jealous, my dog would take off, that's why he's on a leash. And if someone says, my dog thinks your dog's a stuffed animal, will you put it on? I absolutely have no problem doing that. And I think that truly is most of the people. And so are we gonna try to, I'm not trying to walk away from, we need to think about how do we work this leash law? How do we let people know they have to be conscious of their dog, and people need to police the walkers up there ourselves. And that's why I started to approach people, because I want more people up there to have the dialogue of, hey, you know, your dog's running a little crazy, could you get it closer? Because otherwise, we're all going to be following the rule of on leash all the time. And you know, people still aren't gonna follow it, so you're gonna have people losing their mind that someone's walking up there with a dog off leash and they feel like they're the police. So there's no simple answer. I just don't wanna go to the extreme before we flush out maybe getting more community feedback.
Well, when's the printing deadline, Christine?
Friday?
Yeah. So I think that we have a dog problem at the Medfield State Hospital. That we've had enough reports of people not walking there any longer, of that woman that getting knocked down, and so that it just concerns me. And I've seen plenty of people who just ignore the dogs on leashes in the quad area. My understanding was that we actually had a leash law problem in town because our leash law wasn't enforceable. I know that John Thompson drafted a potential leash law for us to look at a couple of years ago, I thought.
I did this.
You did that?
I updated it.
So are we able to, do we have something that works now, Mark, or not?
So, to recognize Selectman Murphy, it's a very complex problem dealing with dogs generally. And legally, it's complex as well. First of all, because the statutes that are in play were drafted back in the 1800s. There was finally an effort by the legislature in 2012 to update it, and unfortunately, they were driven by dealing with certain groups, but they didn't reach out to municipal council to get our input. They just put this in place, and in many respects made it, there were some improvements, but it's still a mess. So, the bylaw that we have in place, there was a committee working on a bylaw, and they weren't ready to go, and I think it looks like in 2018, I basically had a bylaw that I had worked on in Franklin, which had made the rounds and had been adopted by other municipal council and improved upon. We put that in place. So there are multiple levels of enforcement potential. It's basically whether you have the stomach to do. So you can have an isolated incident like a dog off leash, and it's a no harm, no foul of the fact that they're technically not complying, or then you can have any level of escalation involving a dog attack or whatever. And when it gets up to that level, first of all, the problem is apprehension and enforcement. If they take off, as was alluded to, you got a police matter. And you just hope that enough people, somebody got a registration or what have you, that you can follow up. Then you have plenty of authority to take steps to have the dog confined, if it's a dog within town, to control it, or to report it to the town where the dog resides and let those officials take whatever steps are necessary. So there is a rather crude mechanism in place. It's just the problem with trying to enforce it. If you just have people that, even a few that are inconsiderate or scofflaws or what have you, that's the problem.
But you're satisfied with the mechanism that we have in place if we wanted to do something?
The
we could.
only issue I raised when Nick was tweaking the language here was, if what you're going to do is take away the voice command and require that the dog be leashed, then, in my opinion, you needed to specify a length of the leash for it to be enforceable, no more than X number of feet. You got those,
Retractable.
yeah, things that'll go out 10, 12 feet if you let them, and there's, the dog's on a leash, and so now you're in a big fight about it, and it's not predictable, it's not enforceable. So if you're gonna tighten it up, you might as well do it right.
And so when the reality is, and I go up there a lot between, let's say, 3 and 6. There's various people I know that, and I don't know them personally, I'm used to seeing them. They've got their dog trailing behind them, and they're running, probably getting 2 or 3 miles in. And Jenny can't be all places all at once. So how are we going to try to truly enforce this without potentially starting to communicate it, so that people realize we are going to make a change instead of trying to do it overnight? Versus say, and that's what I'm trying to do at the state hospital right now. When I go and introduce myself, every person to the letter has been so nice, and no one is saying, oh, here's a simple fix. They're all like, you know what, it's not an easy discussion, and we know that to keep it, to be a friendly area, and again, we're talking about state hospital. We still have issues at Wheelock. It happens around town. We just happen to be talking state hospital, but Wheelock certainly has their challenges.
So let me just, my experience anecdotally, living in Medway and working in Franklin as well, both have dog parks, and it's been turned over to the groups that use them, and they police themselves. They came up with their own set of regs, and if there's a problem, somebody is just, they perhaps given a warning, then they're out, because they don't wanna ruin it for the group that's there, and so they self-police.
And to
But
me,
that's not like a huge thing like the state hospital, it's a more confined areas, but it works in the more confined areas.
But I really think, and I really hope we can go the path of opening the lines of communication, because again, a lot of these people are not Medfield residents, right? And so this is a beautiful piece of property. It was state property for so long. We want to welcome people into Medfield, not push them out. And something like Saturday where we start the conversation. And I have no problem handing out, like, you know, 'cause let's start thinking about it, because we don't want people to say, I don't want to go up there. We also need to make sure people clean up after their dogs, right? And can I bring up the trash cans?
You can bring up the trash cans. They're not our trash cans, but you can bring them up.
So there are trash cans up there, but they don't get emptied, right? And so I would say 99.9% of the people are trying to put their trash in those trash cans, and then they start to overflow. Again, I walk up there a lot. I do not see a lot of stray bags. I probably see more stray bags at Wheelock than I do at the state hospital. But I would like to see something, a gentleman that I've known for a long time said to me the other day, I think this is probably the most used property in the town by citizens. Why aren't we just picking up? Why aren't we coming in once a week trying to clean this up? And that way, if we actually treat the land like we care and we want to keep it clean, other people will do the same. But if the trash cans are overflowing, what message are we sending?
So is that something that the DPW should be doing? I know that John Thompson had a plan where you would hire a service. He found a service that would pick it up.
There is a group at the state hospital who's managing that.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of volunteers now at the state hospital that have put signs on
But
the
they aren't
sides of their
getting
cars.
emptied
and-
as often as people would like.
They're not getting emptied,
Right.
yeah, exactly. I mean, you walk through, if you go to the back parking lot and you start going up that first hill and you go to the left, there are 2 trash cans that are overflowing in the woods. And it just, again, it sends a message. If we don't care, then why should others? If we're concerned about keeping it clean, let's send that right message.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna put out trash cans, you should be emptying them. But
We don't put them out.
I know, it's the,
Yeah, just to clarify.
but, well, that's part of the whole issue, I think, up at the state hospital, is that there's this group that has sort of taken over management of it that is not really related to the town. They're just a bunch of volunteers. And so, I had a sense that our dog leash law was not enforceable, that it wasn't, but you're saying we changed it and made it enforceable?
No, that's the one part we left alone. So, actually, that was a legendary town meeting that predated my tenure as town council, but from what I understand, it was one of the most contentious, for Mike Sullivan, it was one of the most contentious discussions at town meeting when that came up. And probably is why the compromise wording was agreed to, that if the dog was under voice control, essentially, that was the equivalent. And that's the problem. I mean, obviously, if the dog's on a leash of up to a maximum length, there's no question about it. Either the dog's on a leash or they're not. But once you change that, and either that's not specified, or you're allowed to go with voice command, now you're in a very gray area. And incidentally, it's not unique to the dog stuff. Local fines, although they're provided for and were authorized, the enforcement mechanism is non-existent. So you can write tickets, and even that, if they don't pay them voluntarily, you still have to initiate a district court action. And that's where the courts are overwhelmed, and they just don't give it serious attention.
So, Mark, when I went to our charter, the Medfield Town, and I went under animals, and I went under dog control, and there's all these dog licenses, impounding, release, disposition, violations, penalties, enforcement. What is this, if it's
It's a
in our-
bylaw.
So the bylaws exist, yes? Okay. So we're not trying to create new bylaws.
Well, if these
There
bylaws
was a
don't work,
suggestion, I saw, there was a draft floating around to tighten up the language with respect to requiring dogs to be on a leash in a certain area on the state hospital property. That was out there in draft. That was a possible solution, and I reviewed that and gave my input. So
That's what's currently listed in the warrant now, because we were just trying to address the issue at the state hospital, not taking the issue on townwide.
Okay.
Right.
It was
An amendment to that.
It was formatted in a way, so it's an amendment to chapter 100, which is,
But I have that.
these are bylaws.
Yeah.
The charter's the very first part, then they're all bylaws. Not that there's a tremendous legal distinction anyway. So Nick went in and took one of these sections and tweaked it, and we formatted it in a way that you could add additional properties if you wanted to. But it started with the core campus, I guess, at the state hospital as a proposal. And I guess there was, the warrant committee discussed it as well. And
Warrant committee has not discussed it yet.
No, okay.
So are we defining the core campus as the quad? So you can walk the outer bit, you can walk the loop, and you can walk behind the quad, and you're not,
I don't know
On the
if we
road.
defined it, frankly.
No, it's very vague. It just says within the campus of the Medfield State Hospital.
That's
So
so
that
we-
gives you basically huge
Changed
latitude.
it. Yes, originally, the draft that you reviewed said quad, but there was some discussion as to whether or not we wanted to include the water tower parcel after hearing the Redestos at our last meeting. So I broadened the article to be within the campus, because I'm trying to go to print, and then I figured you could narrow it down at town meeting if you liked.
Mhm.
So that's why it currently says the whole campus.
Yeah,
Oh,
you could,
all right.
you absolutely could have broader language in the warrant and narrow it at town meeting.
say that one more time, Mark, I'm sorry.
You can have broader language in your warrant and then a motion that's narrower at town meeting.
But you can't go the other way.
So is that the reason that we don't specify a length to the leash like you're suggesting here? Because we'll add that later,
No, we just left that up for you to have it as part of your discussion.
okay? Well, Mark
Yeah.
just said we needed a length for the leash.
No, he said it would make it easier. Like most towns, if you're gonna have a leash law, they have 6 feet, right? That's the,
8 or 8,
or 8.
no longer than.
Yeah.
It's, again, it's because of those retractable things that'll go out to 10 or 12 feet if you let them.
I'm gonna tell you, I'm so anti the campus, because there are areas where a lot of the older people are walking is where it's paved. The campus where that dirt road is not paved. You're coming up from the Arboretum, and that is something the one thing I've talked to people about is dogs off leash are actually tend to be less aggressive than dogs on leash. Dogs leash to leash tend to they're just more aggressive. They have
With other dogs.
with other, yeah.
But not
Well,
with other people.
Well, but it does. If you've I'll pick out a breed. I'm not picking if anyone's watching. But like boxers, just naturally when they're puppies, they're going to jump. It doesn't mean I walk by you, they're not going to want to jump. We're never going to, my opinion is we're never going to say it's never going to happen. I understand we're trying to reduce it to a certain extent, but 97% of the people are being penalized, or they're just gonna say, screw it. I'm going to ignore it because this is now just too broad. But if you wanna keep the pavement and start like that, let's be a lot more self-conscious of, especially because that's where Cam's going to have a lot of their activities, is right in the quad. So you're gonna be pushing people out. If you want people to not bother with the quad when an event's going on, then let's get them to the outer edges. I just, as a dog owner, I don't know if you guys have dogs, so like I'm up there a lot. I watch what goes on. I want to make sure that we're representing 97% of the people and not worrying about the 3.
Well, let me challenge that.
Okay.
Because if that 70-year-old woman had been pushed down onto the concrete and had cracked her head open and had a brain bleed and was in rehab for several number of months or did never come out of rehab, would you still be for the 97%?
It's accidents are going to happen. You're trying to say we're going to prevent it, that someone's still going to have a dog potentially off leash up there. Like it is not going to be so militant that every dog is going to be in a leash. I just know it's not going to happen.
It could be. We could just say no dogs on the state hospital.
And people are still going to, I hate to say
Well,
it.
no, then there's no question about is your dog under control, or is your dog on a leash, or is it a 10-foot leash? It's just if you're there and you've got a dog. I'm not really advocating for
I
this,
know.
But my point is, much of what you're calling for is the conversations that we've been having for like 4 years. And I've been one of the ones who wants to keep the lightest rein possible on this. Yes, I have a dog. We go up there occasionally, but we do other stuff. But my inclination is not to control that. But when the one that got me, besides the girl at Dover Sherborne, who had a major disruption in life through irresponsible dog owner, was this lady that sent us the email that said, I walk up here with 4 women, and yesterday or Tuesday or whatever, Thursday morning, we were out walking, and my 70-year-old companion got jumped down from behind, knocked to the ground, and I'm sitting there, so I've had a mother-in-law who tripped over our dog's bowl in the kitchen, and she fell over and cracked her head, and she was in rehab for months. Well, not months, weeks, and she had a brain bleed.
Yep.
And so this is not like small stuff, this is
Oh, no.
important stuff.
So
And
would-
so the issue is, it's not, having the conversation you're talking about, I agree, is what you need. The only problem is that is the equivalent of pedaling a bike continuously uphill. because we've had these conversations. I mean, like I said, VizWiz, they've had special things to clean things up. The trash pickup is a different issue. That's an operations issue. We can deal with that. We've had a couple of because we have had some conversations about this. The idea, I don't think 97% are good, so don't worry about 3%. I can't get there anymore. I think that's probably where I was. I can't get there anymore. We can figure out something around harder enforcement and actually making it stick, but then that probably involves some sort of a commitment of the animal control officer or an augmented animal control officer, where it's kind of like putting radar traps on Farm Street. You know, nobody goes fast on Farm Street because Dover's traps are there like every other day. So there's ways you can set the tone, but it does take a commitment of manpower. The two other things that we've talked about, the thing we've started to do with this leash in the quad is you basically just put a certain amount of area, which is the area that is of greatest interest to people who like to just walk. Put that thing off limits, and then you leave the rest open. And I thought that would have been good, except for Bill's neighbor with the chickens, until the folks from Long Meadow came and they were saying, you know, there's times I've had 6 dogs in my yard and I've been afraid to go in my own backyard. And there's some owner, I can't even see him. And so it's like, I had no idea that we had that problem until a couple weeks ago. So it's like, well, I don't even know if keeping the stuff to the built-up area is gonna totally solve the problem, although it would be a step in the right direction.
Right.
There's 2 other things we've talked about. We didn't do the second part just because it's logistically complex, which is to put in a big sign with a reporting board that basically, it's kind of like when you're in a car accident. If either owner wants to call the police to report the accident, the other has to say, oh no, it's minor, don't do it, you'll be in trouble. I think it's possible that we could go down the path of mandatory reporting. If in any incident, either adult or either party in the incident wants it to be a recorded report, you're obligated to identify who you are, where you live, what your dog is, what you think happened. They'll say the same thing, and then the animal control officer can pick those reports out of a box. Most of them probably won't require serious action, but there are times when people have been up a big enough problem up there, they get a letter of disinvite that says, don't come back
Yeah,
here. And they get thrown
absolutely.
out. The other thing I think, Pete, you've at times in these conversations been an advocate of is to
Well,
basically have a
suggesting-
registration.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you have that incident, Gus, I'm just afraid that, like Eileen was saying, that the people will just take off. And unless you have their data from their registration, their parking permit, you don't know who they are, so.
That's a little more
Or
like the
you
Rocky
have
Woods.
surveillance cameras that catch that information.
Yeah, we probably don't want to go that far, because at some
But
point
that's
here.
the
we could
problem,
be
because
open.
if
At some point, we're not gonna have the land, right?
Unfortunately, with dogs, and I've been a dog person, and I'm still associated, even though I don't have one, I know all that. This was actually drafted, my thought process in drafting this was the old adage, there aren't bad dogs, it's just bad dog owners. So this was drafted with a mind to making it very expensive if people were gonna act irresponsibly.
We don't have that, although,
What?
we don't have that, right?
Yes, this is,
That's ours?
yeah.
Yeah, I have a copy right here. I
The
made
copies put out for tonight. But unfortunately, there is a small percentage of irresponsible dog owners, the ones that have given certain breeds bad names, for instance. Some of these breeds are frankly very sweet, and with any dog, they need to be properly trained from an early age, but some people just, they don't want that responsibility. Or it's macho not to do it or something, and that's where the problems come from.
I even talked to some people and said, what if we did, you go to swimming pools and they'll have senior swim, right? Is it 10 to 12? Is it 12 to 2? I mean, is there a way to just say, the quad, there's no dogs allowed for a certain period? And it's really easy to police because it says, no dogs allowed from this period to this period. Now, some people have said that's not a bad idea. Others, again, because I'm not gonna please everybody, well, then you're telling somebody who likes to walk early in the morning, the only time they're safe. So again, you're never gonna solve it, but is there a way to start getting the message out that we want to be more dog conscious and to listen to the citizens? They're saying, you guys, you need to do something.
I feel like we've been trying to do that, but Bill, if, you probably need a microphone, but why don't you go ahead and weigh in?
Eileen, is this an extra?
This could be the most
Eileen?
controversial thing I've said all week.
Eileen, is this an extra, or do you need?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
All right, so this is the first time in 47 years that I haven't had a dog, all right? But
Sorry.
obviously, living next to the hospital, I mean, I've been up there, I've seen what's gone on. I stopped taking pictures of cars pulling up with professional signs on the side of the car. I mean, I could probably dig them out. 5, 6, 7, 8 dogs come out, doggy dates, whatever, all these kinds of things and everything else. That's a big issue. We have residents and their friends walking, 2 people walking 6 dogs. That's one of the chicken incidents. 3 dogs came over the wall, the other 3 stayed, and when I chased them back, the owner denied, you know, that those were the 3 dogs. And so the idea about having other walkers challenge people who are violating the rules and everything else, a few people tried that. And mostly women tried it. Not very successful with male dog walkers. Not male dogs, male people walking dogs. And in fact, the women were actually threatened, essentially to mind their own business and everything else and leave. And a few of the women, at least one of them was on a committee and dropped off the committee because of that kind of activity. So that doesn't work unless you're willing to fight. And I would suspect that most people think about their dogs the same way they think about their children. Don't denigrate the children, don't talk down, don't speak ill of them or discipline them or anything else, which is obviously a good thing, but the dogs are not necessarily trained. Jumping dogs, the simplest thing in the world to stop. Most people could stop their dog from jumping in about 5 minutes if they took the time to do it. The other thing I want to say is some of this property that abuts the hospital is ultimately going to be turned over to DCR. DCR has restrictions and requirements. Last time I checked, they were limited to 3 dogs per person. So the town ought to think about something along those lines as we get further down the road. Once they finish the cleanup at the hospital and the remaining pieces of property that have yet to be transferred, that property is going to go to DCR. Now, how much funding DCR has to police the number of dogs that walk is another issue. But I'm saying for consistency, you might just want to consider that. And I think that's probably pretty much all I want to say. Just some thoughts.
Thank you, Bill. Yep.
I've mentioned these things before. Again, I'm trying to be neutral. One of the great things about where we live is that we used to have the hound dogs come over, the foxhounds come over the wall when the hunt club had their, didn't mind that at all. I thought it was great, so.
They're doing that again soon. I think there's signs they just put up, the dates that they're gonna be having the dogs come through.
Good, yeah.
So my sense is that we need something in the quad area where dogs really have to be on the leash all the time. You need to define the area pretty clearly, so that if there is ever an enforcement action, that it can stick. I think that there, you know, if people want to walk off leash up there, there's tons of room to walk off leash up there. And that really we should just try to be pushing the people with the off-leash walkers or out of the quad area.
I mean, one option would be to have dogs have to be on leash. Dogs can only be off leash north of the quad. So basically, when you hit the north, once you get outside of the buildings.
But in the
have to be on
Arboretum, they can't. Because I'll tell you, when I come in, I park down on Hospital Road. There's a little white,
Well, you
there's a
can almost
circular.
have to.
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't
So-
have to. You could be on a leash.
No, why not?
I know you don't want to be on a leash.
But I'm telling you,
you
there's
could
no
be on a
reason
leash.
for him to be on a leash. When we get out, there's nobody living in those homes.
But there's walkers.
Yes, there's a handful.
Yeah.
And again, when you look at what's going on, you're asking good dog owners, which I said there's more good than there are bad, to have to do something that naturally there's no reason to. And I'm gonna tell you, having a dog off leash is good for the dog.
But there's plenty of, what Pete's saying, but there's all kinds of open space to do that.
If you go to the back, but
Yeah.
sometimes when it's muddy and gross, you don't want to do that. You want to keep it on that gravel, and you can just turn around and come right back down.
I could see opening up the green and opening up south of Hospital Road.
People will come up that way today if they want to park to the kind of left of the school buses, and they'll come across that field, and then they come up. And a lot of people do what I do because I don't want to walk through the quad off leash. I just go literally around the circumference of it, where there is really no road. So again, people who are concerned about walking, it's not very level, so that's why the quad comes in handy. That is very smooth. But
Right, I'm curious, if we had a bunch of walkers that didn't like dogs or didn't appreciate dogs, I'd be curious to hear what they would say we should do.
And that's why I think Saturday, to me, I want to go into this and get as much feedback from a variety of people. Because I think Saturday at the Belfort event, I think there's going to be a lot of little kids, it's going to be a lot of young families, and I want to hear from them. Because again, we're not just going to solve this with one simple, this is our rule going forward. People are going to break those rules. How do we make it so that we can do it? Well, they are.
What that's saying is that the rule that we're trying to impose is one that we can't enforce. And so I think that's sort of a pointless rule. So either we're saying, well, there's just nothing you can do because there's a lot of good dog walkers, and if you try to restrict what they do, they're gonna blow you off. And the people who don't wanna walk, who don't walk there because they just aren't comfortable with the experience they're having with dogs, find another place to walk. That's kind of what we're telling the people who are not walking at the state hospital right now, what they can do. Because, there's nothing you do that violates the laws, and we're not prepared to enforce any rules for anybody else that might make it easier for you to walk there.
I wish Jenny was here, because I'd really like to hear from the dog officer. Because I'm sure she could walk up and immediately see the dogs that are gonna wreak havoc, which those are the owners that need to be called out, and the other dogs that are literally like the dog that walks holding his own leash, just cruising right along. Let that person move right along. They're not going to be wreaking havoc.
Well, but that would then say Jenny has to be full-time at the state hospital judging dogs by sight. We need something that's practical.
Well, but help me, Gus, if we say we're going to put a rule in that we're gonna fine, and she's not there all the time, who's gonna enforce it?
Right, so what's the conclusion of that point?
Well, that's all I'm trying to get at is, I think if we start off with, the people using the state hospital now more than ever before because of COVID. That was actually not such a crazy place pre-COVID, right? A lot of people found that it's a place to go, very open, lots of trails. So we have more people, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear from others, that there is a lot more foot traffic from other communities. Let's, as I said in my opening remarks, can we at least start to have that dialogue and have that conversation, let people know where we're going? And I don't know, now I'll throw a curveball out there. We have a town meeting coming up May 2nd. We also have a special town meeting coming up, conveniently about the state hospital, late June. Would we want to consider having a warrant article at that meeting when we're talking about the land and who's using it today? And that gives us a little bit more wiggle room to then come back with something. We've had a chance to talk to the community. We've seen an event that they're holding up Saturday. Are people listening when people say, hey, you know what, I got a little kid over here, could you put your dog on a leash? If they're not gonna listen, we're seeing that firsthand now, 2022.
Well, Pete, what are your reactions, timing-wise, between a May town meeting and a June town meeting?
Well, I guess I've always hoped that we could have a dog leash law that actually is enforceable. I think it's problematic to have one that says that dogs have to be under voice control, because that's clearly, you can't enforce a leash law then. So I think that we probably should have a leash law. I think that I think that we've got a problem at the state hospital with the dogs, and especially and so I think we need to do something. I didn't realize that this was gonna be the focus of the discussion here tonight, so my idea would be to somehow require that people have dogs on leashes inside a clearly defined area at the hospital, and if you wanna be off leash, there's tons of woods up there and fields, and go into the fields and woods.
As a single female, I'm not going through the woods at 4:35 in the afternoon. I would like to walk very comfortably on the paths, and I'm representing a dog owner that goes up there all the time. That me as a single female with the little dog, that at best he's gonna do is hurt somebody wagging his tail, not going deep into the woods. I am definitely going around the circumference, which I do just about every night.
So that's probably a discussion to be had, where's the line, but, have some
Yeah.
sort of clear demarcation so that you have something that you can do something with if you need to.
I will say the way I've looked at this is, we've talked about rules and the ability or inability to enforce rules. So there's one set of actions that are in the direction of enforcement, rules, and, mandatory coercion. The registration, the mandatory reporting is actually not first and foremost intended to, like, cost people money or cause people to do reports. It's the issue, if you build in mandatory reporting or if you build in registration where we know who you are, what you're doing is you're increasing the sense of accountability that people have that says, well, wait a minute, you know, when I drive my car and I have a license plate on it, I can't just blow through the red light because somebody will see the license plate and I'll get in trouble. If I don't have a license plate on, well, all you know is it's a late model vehicle. So to be honest, in my thinking about this, because of the things we've talked about with enforcement, where my head has tried to go is, are there things we can do that give people a greater sense of accountability?
Yep.
And that tends to be, in my mind, the registration approach or the reporting systems. It's not because we're gonna get gobs of reports, it's that suddenly people realize, wait a minute, if somebody requires me, you know, I can have an accidental encounter with somebody because my dog got overexcited and jumped up on him and knocked him down, but if they tell me they want me to report it, I either have to report it or they're gonna provide information, and bottom line is, if someone asks you to report something and you fail to and you try to get away, we hunt you down, you get a letter of disinvite. You mess that up once, you're gone.
Well, I'll give you, even on that, even better is, and I was asking this the other night too, I think every town has a dog license requirement, correct? So you have to, so we get that dog license number, we now know for certain at least that dog has the rabies certificate covered.
As long
right?
as you get the license number.
Well, and that's something that maybe we need
Yeah.
to start collecting, that if
Yeah.
people wanna come up there, even if it's just a sticker,
That's
no
the
fee.
registration,
But
that's
is
the
there
registration.
a way to make sure we're getting the dog license? Cause then people
Mhm.
realize we're serious, that if you don't have a dog license, if your dog doesn't
Mhm.
have that tag, then unfortunately you're not welcome.
I think one of the issues you're gonna run into, and we talked about this last time with the chief, is that you're approaching people checking if they have that tag. So you're saying to somebody, because we're not gonna license people from out of town, we're not gonna license their dogs from out of town, so you're walking up to somebody saying, you don't look like you live in Medfield, can I see your dog?
No, but I think every town makes it. I was reading it on the state website. I think every town requires,
Right.
if you own a dog, you have to have a dog license. Every town requires that you prove that your dog has rabies certificate. So like I said, I bumped into great ladies from Holliston, Rentham, Westwood, Walpole.
So you're fine with out-of-town people?
Oh,
Okay,
yeah. Oh,
okay.
gosh, yeah.
That's
The
what I
last thing I
thought.
want to do is tell people you're not welcome to Medfield. Holy smokes.
Okay.
I mean, come on.
Just checking, double checking. It's first night, just checking.
Well, I think I voiced a little bit of my opinion tonight.
Well, I think,
So one thing that occurs to me is if you want a way to identify the dogs, a fairly inexpensive way might be an RFID tag. Those are the if you have a reader, then it gives you the information off the tag. And so that,
We're not gonna staff the hospital 24/7 to do this.
no, you don't, you'd have some sort of,
So you're back to the enforcement issue again.
Well, and if Trinity goes the right direction, this will be a smaller problem, not a bigger problem.
maybe or maybe not. They're not buying all the property, so
Sure.
we still have stuff. For sure, I think right on the campus it will. I think we've probably beaten this conversation to death for tonight.
absolutely.
Well, we do need an answer for the warrant
No,
to
so
go to
I'm
print.
gonna
Okay.
suggest a couple things. Number one, the couple things. First off, we're saying, okay, we ought to actively go out and hear what people have to say, and that's fine. And for those people listening now and some of the people that have reached out before, I guess we should also ask them to weigh in on this issue.
Yep.
My sense would be, what I heard here is that all the enforcement actions are sort of like barking at the moon, no pun intended. And that it might be better for us, if we're gonna try something new, to see if something else will work. That something new might be that registration process. Maybe, I'm just saying what I think I hear. It could be the mandatory reporting, but there's some mechanics there. So from the standpoint of the warrant, I'm okay if we take this off the annual town meeting warrant article with the understanding that we might add it as a warrant article for the special town meeting in June. So just to keep this bounded
Perfect.
going into the summer. Does that sound
Can-
reasonable?
That would
It
get you a
does,
big
can I bring up
turnout.
one point, though?
Mhm.
I think we're gonna have an extended town meeting talking about the project with Trinity. I think having a dog discussion could be equal in length if the prior debate holds. So just timing-wise, just keep that in mind.
We had 2 articles, that would be pretty impressive. Yeah, I mean,
Right, I'm just- You've already
We
talked
also
about it for an
have a
hour
pooper-
tonight,
Yeah.
just the three
We
of
have a
you.
Right.
pooper scooper bylaw on the books that never gets enforced either.
Well, yeah, so what I'm getting at is, so let's stop wasting our time talking about ever more menacing sounding rules that we either have no intention of enforcing or no commitment to doing what it takes to enforce or no ability to enforce. Let's just recognize that's a direction that we've been talking about forever, and it's not, once we get somebody who dies from this, we'll have a will. We don't have that yet. So let's just recognize that's not the direction, and what we need to do is look for options that give people a greater sense of personal accountability. And try that and see if we can make progress.
Okay, so we'll withdraw this for,
Withdraw it for now, and with the expectation certainly that we will come back in based on feedback with something, or else an admission of defeat, that we just can't do anything, and people in town have to deal with dogs that are allowed to do what they want, because that's more important than letting people do
There's
what
all
they want.
kinds of consequences, it's just a matter of being able to identify.
Right.
If somebody totally irresponsible that takes off, then it's only the limits of police ability to
Yeah.
identify them. And frankly, today with social media, with everybody with a camera and everyone else, and they see an incident, the likelihood is that, you probably get them identified.
And incidentally, that one example that I gave of the lady who got knocked down, the owner said, this is not typical of my dog. The owner followed up with the lady to make sure, so it was not a hit and run, or push and run. It
Legally,
was-
there's strict liability. The
Right.
old adage is that one dog gets one bite, that's not even legally true.
Mhm.
As Pete would know, doing personal injury work, the only other thing is, although there's all this legal liability, and you have these options if injury or death occurs, when you take them to court, most people have, a lot of people have dogs, and they don't understand that their homeowner's insurance covers this, so they see somebody out there and they say, there but the grace of God go I with my dog, and so they're very difficult cases to handle from a plaintiff lawyer's standpoint.
Gus, I'll take
Right.
responsibility, and I will
Okay.
communicate,
Well,
so.
we can all try to do that.
Okay.
And I think that to the extent any of us have heard from people here in town with opinions, we probably should reach out and get that refreshed.
Yeah,
And then-
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair
that'd be the
enough.
responsible thing to do. Thank you.
All right, okay. What else you want to talk about, Christine?
so I would like to ask you to vote to sign and post the 2022 annual town meeting warrant. We are still waiting for one article, which I believe should be finalized tomorrow night, and that's the new school building committee bylaw. So once we have that in, and incorporated in, I'll call each of you in to come in to sign the warrant. But I'd like to get that posted sooner rather than later.
So,
Did you want this voted tonight then?
I would like to vote it tonight, and then I'll have you come in as soon as it's finalized.
Okay.
works okay for me.
I move to vote to sign and post the 2022 annual town meeting warrant.
Second?
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, done.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a vote to appoint Michael Marcucci to the Affordable Housing Trust. Mike stepped down as the Board of Selectmen representative to the Affordable Housing Trust, but has been functioning as the chair up until he stopped being on the BOS, and has indicated that he would like to still continue to serve. I think the thought is he still continues to serve as the chair.
Correct.
He's back on there, so he's got the experience.
I had a question. We have a policy in terms of advertising open positions. Have we done that?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion?
Second?
But I didn't move you.
Oh,
I was
sorry.
looking for one.
I'm actually gonna, Gus, I'm gonna
I'd make it for-
recuse myself from this.
Okay. Motion?
Second? Yeah,
No.
motion.
Motion.
Sorry.
Okay, and I will second the motion to appoint Michael Marcucci to the Affordable Housing Trust. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and Pete, you recused yourself?
I did.
Okay. As opposed, okay. So approved 2-0. And I think that's probably the right thing to have done, Pete, now that my brain is catching up with the conversation. Next item is a vote to appoint a member of the Board of Selectmen to serve on the Affordable Housing Trust, and this is probably open for a discussion, but I think my thought would be Eileen would be a good choice. And
I
you,
thought that too.
Eileen,
Hey,
This is democracy in action, everyone. This is how things get done. So, I guess, unless you're not bashful about
I'm not
moving to-
opposed, I would be happy to join.
Oh, excellent.
Sure.
I vote
Okay.
to appoint Eileen Murphy to the, serve on the Affordable Housing Trust.
Are you willing to shamelessly second?
Do I second myself
Yes,
on that
yes, you can. Yes, okay, all those in favor?
Yes.
Aye, all right. Okay, next is to approve one-day beer and wine licenses for the Council on Aging for the following events: Thursday, April 7th, for the rescheduled women's painting event from 6 to 8:30 PM on April 7th. Now, I would point out that when this came before, the fact that this was a beer and wine for a women's painting event really caught my attention as saying, this is probably a fun event. I assume they had to get a bigger venue, which is why they had to reschedule it. And the second item is on Wednesday, April 27th, for a volunteer appreciation event, 4:30 to 7:30 PM.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye, okay, approved. Next item is vote to distribute $3,000 from the Town of Medfield Economic Vitality Fund. Eileen, for your benefit, there's a fund that has around $15,000 in it, which is sort of under the control, it is under the
It's under
control of the
control of
Board of
Board of Selectmen.
Selectmen. It's intended to be used in any ways that will contribute to economic vitality. The Garden Club has taken care of all our islands for a number of years, and it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, after something like 20 years of having completely done it at their own expense, they were saying that the cost of, they weren't, I think part of it was the fundraising of the wreath wasn't, sale wasn't quite doing what it used to do, and I'm guessing that some of the cost of things cost money. They actually they redesigned the islands to put in plants that were less dependent on water, so they were a little more robust. And they came to us and asked for $3,000 to help defray the cost, and so again, they're asking for it this year, just so you know the background. Vote to distribute $3,000 from the Town of Medfield Economic Vitality Fund to the Medfield Garden Club to augment the cost of renovations and maintenance of its 21 municipal beautification sites.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Approved. I guess I should keep asking opposed, just to cover the ground. Vote, and this again, Pete, you'll have to recuse yourself. Vote to appoint Mead, Tallerman, Costa as special counsel on matters relating to defense of an appeal of a certain Chapter 40B decision issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals for a certain property located off of Ice House Road and such other tasks as may be directed by the client.
And I recuse myself from this.
I move to,
Okay, I second. All those in favor?
yes.
Aye. Okay, so that's approved 2-0, 1 recusal. And then, never seen a list of this many beer and wine, well, now,
All
alcohol, all alcohol requests. We rarely
Is
get
that-
all alcohol
Is
requests.
that legal to have that many
I
cakes?
think it is when it's a
You
cultural
can have a
and arts.
maximum of 30.
When it has to do with cultural and arts in Medfield, we do not only deal with craft beer and wine, we actually go for all alcohol. So we have received,
Nonprofits are eligible,
nonprofits, you don't have to actually be culturally advanced, just nonprofit.
right.
In this case, it is culturally advanced, yes.
Am I allowed to ask a question about the prior,
Oh, please do, yes.
where Selectman Peterson recused himself? I'm wondering why he's allowed to continue to sit in the meeting, since it's, just in my opinion, he has sat in through all of the meetings, and the lawsuit has been filed against the town. He's an elected official by the people, and he's suing the people. And he has voted contrary on another property where I think there's only 8 feet and a building went up. So I think there's a true conflict of interest. He sits in the senior center, but now it's, the old people can't be near me. So I personally have an objection that he's allowed to sit through all of this.
So I would ask the town council to just give some context for this, if you are in a position to do so.
All I'm gonna say is that these decisions are personal with whoever the person is that's involved. There's no mechanism for the other board members to impose their will. It's a personal decision on his part, what to participate in, what not to participate in. And so it is what it is. The boards met in executive session without him to discuss the town's position. That was earlier tonight.
He's just, it's premeditated. I mean, he's had to go over this, and his spouse, and this is premeditated. This is a premeditated action, and I can't tell you how upset I am about this. I feel like my trust in an elected official is just completely gone right out the window.
There are legal mechanisms, but the board's ability to take action against one of its members is not one of those.
So, I'm sorry to hear your remarks. I'm sorry to hear your feelings. As a select board member, I don't give up my rights as being a resident of the town and reacting as a person in the town to something that's going on, and that's what I did. And I understand that you disagree with that, and I respect that you have a different opinion. But I won't participate in anything at a select board level that relates to that.
It's good for now. Okay. On to something that's more enjoyable. So what we have is a vote to approve, yeah, it's,
Gee,
Sorry, I have one change to request, which is to scratch the first date of April 23rd.
okay. That will be disappointing. So, at any rate, let me get the right wording here for these dates. So the request is that we approve one-day all alcohol licenses for the Cultural Alliance of Medfield at Medfield State Hospital for the following dates. And I think this is pretty much covering all weekends, but I'll call them all out. April 30th with a rain date of May 1st. I'm not gonna read all the rain dates. The rain date will be the day after the date that I call. So, May 7th, May 14th, May 21st, May 28th, and we're skipping a week, June 11th, June 18th, June 25th, skipping another week, July 9th, July 16th, July 23rd, July 30th, August 6th, August 13th, August 20th, August 27th, September 3rd, September 10th, September 17th, skipping Medfield Day. Really? Okay, October 1st, October 8th, October 15th, and October 22nd.
So moved.
With an approved rain date of the following date in each
With the
case.
approved rain dates being the day following that, which I'm guessing we're talking about a Saturday and a Sunday. Yeah. Any questions or comments?
Well, yeah.
I am kind of curious, so where will the alcohol be served? In and around the chapel area, or where?
On the leased property.
But the buildings will be closed, but it'll be outside, or?
Correct.
Okay.
And what are the hours?
We had put hours that would essentially potentially start at 10 a.m., but they'll flex on the other end to be done an hour before sunset.
And who's gonna be serving?
We'll be hiring licensed bartenders to.
Oh, good.
serve.
Pete, any questions?
No.
And Gene, this isn't like Gene's Bar outside of the chapel, I assume. Is this what associated with events? What's the context for this?
Exactly. And then we have sponsors who are helping to fund the musicians.
So these are in conjunction with performances. So basically, at least your plan right now is to have weekly performances up at the chapel.
That's right. But that would
Great.
also include, like, the New Life 5K road race. We're gonna have music.
Okay.
After the road race, one of these weekends is the gazebo players doing the outdoor Shakespeare. One of them is a comedy event.
Shakespeare's always
Mhm.
good with all
Not just
alcohol.
music, but, yes.
Okay. One of the questions I had, just for us to collectively think about, is that having this event up. I don't know whether there'd be any other organizations throughout the entire summer that would like to run events where they would ask for their own beer and alcohol or beer and wine licenses. You're gonna be doing this right on the leased chapel property. There's nothing that you have planned that would preclude another event being sponsored by another organization that would do that you can foresee? Is there anything that we can foresee that would cause that to be problematic?
The car show is not indicated if they're looking for beer and wine this year.
And hopefully we won't be on the same day.
Okay. Then I have one very minor point about something that we have had as a rule, prudish as some people may think it might be. We have occasional road races. And when these have come up, initially, I think it was Zeala's Brewing, and they wanted to do things. We basically have used like a noontime drinking start. And the real distinction here would be events where it's likely that kids will be participating. Probably an all-adult event wouldn't be quite the same thing. So I would raise a concern around the timing, especially for things like maybe the New Life 5K, which I assume is open for children. And the whole point is having kids go out first thing in the morning to go run a 5K race and then get to the finish line and watch all their parents and other adults, you know, starting to drink at 10 in the morning is probably not the model that we wanna be highlighting there. So I have a concern about those kinds of events certainly starting before noon. I'm not sure, at least in the past, my fellow colleagues have felt that same way.
That makes sense to me, I know, Gus.
So I just wanna make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So if there is something like the 5K, would you be asking for events like that to push it to noontime?
But yeah, that's what I'm really saying. Yeah, basically saying any events that include children. So, I mean, it could be a performance of Hansel and Gretel that, you know, starts at 10 in the morning, but their parents can get a glass of wine. It just doesn't
I
seem,
get that, yeah.
see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So. Well, it's all alcohol, so there's a broader, you know, Bloody Marys. This kind of, so is that would be my one
Can we do 11?
ask.
Can we do 11?
Noon?
11?
Noon? No, for anything that has, I mean, I'm not even saying for everything, I'm saying for things that involve children, that would be the role.
Okay.
We've done that, we've
We
had
have
that.
the 5K and we have another day that's specifically kids,
Okay.
which is May 14th. And May 7th.
When are you gonna start serving them? So you're gonna have alcohol at a kids event?
Well, we wanna be able to have the setup and everything start at 10. So if you wanna have it that we can't actually, say, buy a drink until noon,
Right. Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's physically present and not selling anything is not a problem. It's the sales don't start till noon. Yeah.
for the kids' event.
For the kids events.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Sounds right, signal, yes.
Okay.
Move to motion?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would move that we do that as amended.
Okay.
Second.
So as amended means for kids events, it starts at noon, not at 10.
Understood.
Okay. All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, hold on. Let's see, any other citizens' comments? Anything?
Nothing registered for this
Nothing
evening.
registered? Yes? Oh, just waving goodbye. Okay. Let's see, on the consent agenda, we have 3 items. Sean McCarthy is requesting a change in date for his permit to hold a parade celebrating opening day for Medfield Youth Baseball and Softball from Sunday, May 8th at 3 p.m. to Saturday, May 7th at 3 p.m. I don't know, am I assuming ordinarily the selectmen, this is not just a matter of changing the parade date, but also the date that we should be prepared to walk a
Yes,
couple miles?
you have been
Okay,
invited to
we have
participate.
been invited, so
Yes.
your vote here is not merely on the parade, but probably on your readiness to demonstrate your willingness to walk in this parade.
Can I walk my dog at the same time?
Yeah, you can walk.
On a leash.
On a leash.
On a leash. I will, on a leash.
All right, do I have that's the first one. The second one is the Medfield Lions request a beer and wine license for the Lions Spring Gala event fundraiser at the center on May 7th, 2022. Christine, was there a time, is that an evening thing or daytime thing? Do we know?
I think it's an evening thing, but I don't have a time. We'll look
It's
that
not,
up for you.
it's not conflicting with the youth baseball and softball parade?
What's drinking going on
I'm
that day?
pretty sure it's an evening.
Evening, okay. So we're assuming it's evening. And then the third item is Jen Wilson requests permission to post signs to this would be, I assume, in all the normal places.
In all the normal places,
To
yep.
advertise King Philip K-8 football and cheer registration.
I would move the consent agenda.
Okay,
Second?
second. Okay, all those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All those opposed? Okay, that carries. Approved. Meeting minutes, I have to admit, the only one that I actually did get to was May 26th. So the only one I'm prepared to say is good is May 26th.
Could we just put them all off?
Just put them all off. We're
Please.
going to defer them all. Okay.
I read them, but I'm not gonna, since I wasn't here. I just found them entertaining. Might as well bring myself up to speed.
You know, there's nothing worse than a new.
You're actually legally, you can vote them. Legally, you can vote them if you wanted to.
I'll step, but it brought me up to speed in a lot of issues, so.
Okay, so they're all deferred for now. Brittany will be delighted.
She's gonna be very happy with all three of you.
Town administrator update.
I just had one to make sure that you knew you were invited to the softball and baseball parade, and just welcome Eileen to the board. I know you've been around seeing all the department heads, so great job. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be on board.
And then, next meeting dates, so we actually are having a joint meeting on Thursday night with the school committee, basically it's a listening session. It's a hybrid meeting, so if you can't make it in person to the public safety building, you can actually come in on Zoom. The intention of this particular meeting is that it be a listening session. That it be a forward-looking listening session. So we're not interested in post-adjudication of what we did in the fall. We are interested in hearing what people think the town should take going forward to improve the chances of us being able to put together a reconceived school project that stands a good chance of garnering the supermajority support of the town that's going to be required to move ahead with the school project. So the point here is we're looking for forward-looking things. Just speaking a little bit on this, I met with Jess Riley this morning to go over this. The meeting, I guess she and I will sort of co-chair it, but that both committees will be there and everyone is going to be able to participate. We both are in agreement, we're looking for it to be forward-looking. The way we've talked about it is we're gonna be looking for guidance or points of consideration that people think the town should keep in mind. And we anticipate, when it doesn't have to be this way, but we anticipate some of those points will be around things that people think are important that should be incorporated into whatever the design or the concept for the school is. So it's not exactly like a solution about how big do you want building rooms to be. It's got more to do with what the broad considerations need to be that people believe will be important to have a good school. But also any considerations, guidelines, requests that people have for the process that the town follows to get to that good school. So it's kind of both substance around what would a good school look like here in town and process. We all know that with the town meeting, there's an article that would require at least one public hearing before locations on town buildings are established. Assuming that passes at town meeting, that's one that's gonna be locked in there through an article, but this is not intended to restrict that. We recognize that the process that people went through last fall wound up pushing the town apart in a way that's not how this town normally operates. We've had some knockdown, drag-out arguments. We've had ruffled feathers, we've had, hurt feelings, and maybe even angry responses. But this time around, we wound up with a more completely polarized town. And if we want to get to where we need to get, we need to basically start to bring that back together again. We have the time. We're not going to have a building committee until after the town meeting. There's, some decisions that maybe can be made before that, but mostly as we move ahead in defining a project, that's not going to happen until after the town meeting. So we have some time to make some progress and at least setting up the ground for a more fertile result than what we had last time. So that's coming up. And then our next meeting is April 19th. We have a tentative third meeting for the month scheduled for April 26th. That's a placeholder. We'll have that meeting if it looks like we're going to need it in preparation for our annual town meeting on May 2nd. So we may be here 3 times this month, or we may not.
Depends on how efficient you are at the next meeting. So that's your challenge.
Right. With that, selectmen reports. Eileen? You may not have known you had it to report, but every meeting we have a select report where you can tell us what you've been up to.
Well, as KT, or Christine, mentioned, I had a really great meeting with our police chief yesterday. So impressed. I mean, she has the safety and concern of this town at such a high concern, and just such a really nice woman, and I'd never had a chance to meet her before, and first time I went to the booking room, last time I ever go to the booking room, but just really nice meeting there. As I said, I'm roaming around the state hospital a lot, meeting all sorts of different people, because I will say this, and I know I put this in the patch. I am the type of person, I did not like what happened this past fall, right? And I've been a resident for going on 23 years here. I think it's so important that the town has a voice. I have no agenda. I look out and I see people here. I'm your agenda. So if people have concern, I'm excited as a selectman that they can come and voice it to me. And then the 3 of us can talk and have healthy discussions. Utmost respect to the 2 of you. But that's where this past week I've really tried to engage and let people know I ran unopposed. As people know early on, I wish people did run against me so people had a choice. But I am here. I am 100% committed. And I enjoy, as I move through, I want to get time with Mo and others. The fire chief, we literally almost bumped into one another on Tuesday, but I will get a chance with him. And I just want the citizens to know I'm 100% accessible, and I want to be their voice. So, thank you.
The Medfield Foundation Legacy Fund had a meeting that I attended, and then last night I did what Sarah Sarah Raposo, the town planner, it's called wayfinding, and we're trying to figure out, it has to do with signs, color schemes, taglines, so last night we were coming up with taglines for the town, that sort of thing. So, very interesting process. That's it.
Okay. In that you brought up Sarah, I learned something about what's one of the other things that Sarah does this morning when I was sitting down with Jess Rowley. I had no idea that on a weekly basis there's a group of people who go out on various town paths and trails. They're using GPS tracking, so apparently Sarah is in the process of capturing, using GPS tracking, where these trails are, to where we will have an enhanced set of I guess maps, or one way or the other, we'll have better information for where people can go to take better advantage of our town's trails. And
They've had quite a few adventures on some of them.
yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised, but it's I have this vision of the day that we actually have a trail network in Medfield that somebody could start off in one direction and do the full circle, probably multiple options on the full circle, to be able to go wherever you wanted to in Medfield. So, but anyway, that was something I wasn't aware of until just this morning. So you may be doing more wayfinding in terms of trail signs and putting logs on trails than you.
So we haven't done it for a while, but I was informed at one point that we were going to, as select board, we would perambulate the town bounds. I thought that meant that we were going to walk the whole outside of the town.
That's
So
what
we
I had to
actually
do
got
when I was the
driven
chair.
to certain markers.
That was what I did. That was one of the highlights of my year as the chair the last time, was the opportunity and the duty to perambulate the town's boundaries.
Oh, and you
to
didn't invite the rest of
contemplate-
us, huh? Man.
And contemplate what parts of Walpole or Millis we might like to annex. But we left them alone for now, but
For now.
it's just early thinking. The other item the item I have is tomorrow night, there is another public information session. It's not exactly quite the same listening session probably as Thursday night will be. But as you know, the State Hospital Development Committee is moving ahead. We've moved into the due diligence phase where Trinity is conducting due diligence on the State Hospital property. Due diligence is not just Trinity, though. Both we and Trinity have work to do along the way in anticipation of getting to a final agreement for what the development agreement will be for Trinity. It'll be captured in a land disposition agreement, which is to be finalized before the currently contemplated June 21st meeting, special town meeting, where the town will be asked to authorize the disposition of the State Hospital property so that Trinity can carry out its development efforts. So for those of you who've spent any time looking at what Trinity has proposed, you at the very least should appreciate that it's a pretty complex, big deal project. It's gonna have, if we move ahead with it, if it gets approval, this is gonna have a major impact on the town. We thought it was a good proposal, so I think it's gonna have a major beneficial impact on the town. But nonetheless, the town needs to decide that they're comfortable with it and they're ready to move ahead. So if you have questions, I think this will not be the final information session that the Development Committee will offer. At this stage, I would anticipate that tomorrow night's discussion is gonna be around a lot how the process works, because we don't have the final details of the LDA from Trinity yet. But the information sessions that come in closer to the time that we have a special town meeting will be the time that people can ask detailed questions, I think, about what the final LDA says and what the final proposal is. So, and again, that's a hybrid meeting too, so if you can't make it to the high school library is where that one will be held. We'll be happy to see as many people there as possible. And I think that's it. I don't think I forgot anything else, right? Nothing else comes to mind. Okay, with that, I think, does anybody have any other topics?
No, move to adjourn.
I just want to make the observation, it's only 8:30, 8:33. This isn't going to happen on a routine basis, I can guarantee you. It doesn't even feel right to me that it's not 9 o'clock before we start thinking about these things.
We were
But-
trying to break her in slow on the first agenda.
Yeah. I will say one thing, the Thursday night session, I did hear from Jess, and I agreed with her, that we're targeting a 7 to 9 time window for that meeting, so for any of you that are wondering, that we probably will cut it off at 9 and then figure out the smartest thing to do. There'll be some opportunities to provide feedback beyond that meeting, maybe offline, or, through online, I should say, rather than in person, so that's the planned time frame for Thursday night's meeting. Nothing? All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Did.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye, aye.
And so ends Eileen Murphy's first official Board of Selectmen
Actually, got
meeting.
time
All
to go
right.
back to the tradition.
Very good. We'll see you.
Remember, you did start at 6.
We did start.
You did start at 6.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so it's more
What?
like an
So,
hour.
yeah, this is more like